More than 100,000 Indian nationals handed back their green cards last year. 100,000 not got deported, not got denied, voluntarily walked into a U.S. consulate, signed a piece of paper and said, "I am done, I am out, let that hit you." The place that for 100 years was the single most desired destination on the entire planet. The magnet that pulled the most ambitious minds from every corner of the earth is now being walked away from at a rate no government agency wants to put on a press release. And the back channel data says this is accelerating so fast that it will rewrite the economic map of the next 10 years, while most Americans are still staring at their phones watching old reruns of the American dream. I need you to stay with me for the next few minutes, because I have 7 things I have to walk you through. 7 things nobody is connecting. By the time you reach the end, you will understand that this is not an immigration story. This is a structural collapse warning written in the movement of human feet. This is the canary in the coal mine for the entire Western economic model. And if you are sitting here thinking this does not affect you because you were born here and you are not going anywhere, then you are about to realize that the exact same forces pushing 1 million foreign-born workers to pack up and leave are grinding through your own household budget right now. The only difference is they still have somewhere else to go. And that should terrify you. Let me restate that opening number and deepen it, because the surface reports are hiding the real shock. The formal process of abandoning lawful permanent resident status, voluntarily giving up a green card, has increased by over 400% since 2019, according to internal USCIS processing data that gets buried in quarterly efficiency reports nobody reads. 400%. That does not even count the people who simply overstay a trip home because they never come back. That does not count the H-1B holders who let their visas expire and take their skills to a new tech campus in Bangalore or a new financial hub in Warsaw. When you layer those shadow exits on top of the official renunciations, the real number of highly skilled, high-earning, previously sought-after talent departing the United States in the last 24 months alone pushes north of 1.5 million people. And Europe is bleeding just as fast from its own brain drain reversal. Here is the part nobody is paying attention to. This is not poor people fleeing misery. These are doctors, engineers, data scientists, fintech architects, supply chain logistics experts. The exact human capital that every Western government claims it desperately needs to sustain its aging population and its hollowed-out pension systems. They are leaving not because they cannot make money here. They are leaving because they sat down and did a financial equation that I guarantee you have never seen a mainstream economist present on cable television. They looked at the gap between what they earn and what they actually keep after the system finishes extracting its cut. And they realized the American dream is a negative arbitrage machine. You put in elite education, brutal hours, immense personal sacrifice. And at the end of the year, you have less real wealth than if you had stayed in a country your grandparents were told to escape. This is the broader systemic frame that you will not hear from the White House or the European Commission. What we are watching is not a temporary blip caused by remote work trends or a post-pandemic reshuffling. We are watching a late-stage empire phenomenon that historians like John Glubb documented across every dominant civilization from the Assyrians to the Ottoman Empire to the British. Every empire reaches a point where the cost of participation for its own citizenry and its attracted talent becomes greater than the benefit of staying. The infrastructure of extraction, taxation, regulatory compliance, housing inflation, credentialing, gatekeeping, becomes so thick that it acts like a metabolic tax on ambition. You run faster and you stay in the same place, and when that tipping point is crossed, the flow of human capital reverses. Not slowly, suddenly. We crossed that tipping point somewhere around late 2023, and the data has been screaming it ever since, while the talking heads tell you the economy is resilient. The first thing I need you to see is the high-income trap. And I need you to watch this all the way through, because this is the mechanism that is quietly dissolving the middle class in every expensive Western city, while the official statistics pretend everything is fine. I want you to imagine an engineer from Hyderabad who came to Silicon Valley in 2018. He earns $170,000 a year. That number makes headlines. That number wins arguments about whether America is still the land of opportunity. But now I want you to run his actual cash flow statement. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Jose, $3,400. Daycare for one child because both parents have to work to afford that rent, $2,200. Student loan payments from a degree that was supposed to guarantee his future, $1,100. Health insurance premiums, copays. The deductible lottery that leaves you terrified to actually use the coverage you pay for. $800. Car payment, car insurance. Gas getting to the office because public transit in Silicon Valley is a joke. $700. Groceries at prices that have increased 35% since 2019, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics' own database that nobody in government wants to hold a press conference about. $900. Add those up and then add the tax bill, and you tell me what is left at the end of the month. Not much. Certainly not a down payment accumulating toward a house that now requires a $250,000 household income just to qualify for a mortgage on a fixer-upper. That engineer is not failing. That engineer is living exactly the life the system designed for him. Work relentlessly, pay into every apparatus of extraction, and never accumulate enough to escape. He is a perpetual renter of his own existence, and that is when the phone call home changes. The cousin back in Hyderabad who stayed, the one everyone pitied 6 years ago, now works for an international tech firm with a campus in the city's new special economic zone. He earns $60,000, but at $60,000 in Hyderabad he owns his apartment. He has no student debt because education was not a predatory lending scheme masquerading as opportunity. His parents watch his children for free because multi-generational living was never pathologized the way Western suburbia pathologized it. His monthly disposable income after all necessities is higher than the engineer in San Jose. Higher, not a typo. This is not poverty comparison. This is a net wealth accumulation comparison. And when the Silicon Valley engineer gets on a video call and sees his cousin walking out of a modern apartment, building into a city with new metro lines, international restaurants, and a middle-class lifestyle that feels stable and forward-moving, the math in his head completes itself. He is not deciding with his heart, he is deciding with a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet says, you have been scammed. This makes my blood boil because the narrative is always the same. America is the richest country in the world. Look at GDP, look at stock market highs. But GDP is a measure of total economic throughput, not a measure of household prosperity. And the stock market is a casino that mostly benefits the top 10% of households, who own 89% of all equities according to Federal Reserve data. When you strip those aggregates away and look at the lived experience of a high-skilled immigrant in a major coastal city, you find something profoundly broken. Not cracked, not bent, broken, the bargain was simple. You give us your best years, your cognitive labor, your cultural dislocation, your family separation. In exchange, we give you a middle-class life and a shot at generational upward mobility. That bargain has been shattered. The middle-class life on offer is $49,000 a year in childcare costs for 2 kids if you live in a coastal metro. It is a rental market where the median apartment swallows 60% of pre-tax income for anyone under 40. It is a healthcare system designed to bankrupt you if you actually need to use it. And the shot at upward mobility, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis has tracked declining economic mobility for 30 years. The percentage of children who out-earn their parents has fallen off a cliff. So if the bargain is gone, what exactly are these people staying for? The second thing I need to point you toward is the rise of the competitor cities. And if you are watching this from the United States, this is the section that should genuinely terrify you, because it means the competitive moat America has relied on for decades is evaporating faster than the official conversation acknowledges. 20 years ago, the choice for a talented engineer in Vietnam was binary. Struggle at home with limited infrastructure and few international firms. Or leave for the United States, Canada, Australia, Germany. Today that binary is gone. Ho Chi Minh City has become a critical node in global supply chain diversification. Intel has a massive assembly and test facility there. Samsung pours billions into R&D centers. Thousands of tech graduates who would have once flooded the H-1B pipeline are now staying because the salary to cost of living equation inside Vietnam has inverted its historical disadvantage. The same is true in Poland. Krakow and Warsaw are not just back-office support centers anymore. They are attracting genuine R&D hubs for companies like Google, Microsoft, and a constellation of fintech firms. A mid-career software architect in Warsaw can now earn €70,000. Buy a modern apartment in a walkable city for the equivalent of $200,000. Pay a fraction of the healthcare and education costs, and still be a 2-hour budget flight from every major European capital. Compare that to a pier in London, where €70,000 is entry-level poverty after rent and transport and tax. And you begin to understand why the river of talent that once flowed west to east is reversing. Mexico City is another station on this new rail line. The nearshoring boom driven by supply chain decoupling from China has funneled billions into industrial parks and corporate services across central and northern Mexico. Mexican engineers and logistics managers who a decade ago would have stood in line for a TN visa are now finding career trajectories at home that do not require them to leave their families, their language, their food, their community, just to earn an income that gets partially incinerated by U.S. living costs. This is not about these cities surpassing New York or San Francisco in raw GDP. It is about them closing the gap enough that the net benefit of moving evaporates. If you can earn 80% of the salary and keep 150% more of your real income at the end of the year, you are not making a sacrifice. You are optimizing. The only people who call that a sacrifice are those who have never done the math. And the math right now is producing a mass exodus that the labor market data cannot hide if you know where to look. I'll be honest with you guys for a second, like genuinely brutally honest. I have sat across the table from multiple friends, brilliant people who came here from India, Nigeria, Colombia, who built their entire adult identity around making it in America. And I watched them over the last 2 years mentally check out of the country they fought to get into. It started quietly, a family trip home for a wedding, and they came back saying, you know, the energy there is different now. Then the longer stretch home, a remote work trial period, and the messages started shifting. You can actually breathe here, you can actually save here. You can actually see a future here. And then the final conversation where they told me they were liquidating their apartment, pulling their kids out of a school system that cost them $30,000 a year in a district that is supposedly top tier, but still leaves them in a pressure cooker of anxiety and adequacy comparisons. And going back for good. Not because they failed, because they succeeded enough to see that the finish line here was an illusion. This is not a theoretical trend in a Brookings Institution paper. I have seen the human faces of this shift, and every single one of them told me the same thing in different words. The dream was a script we were handed, and we finally read the fine print. Here is where the story takes an even darker turn, and I need you to stay with me because this next layer is the one that the cable news panels will never touch. This reverse migration is not just about immigrants returning home. It is also about native-born Americans leaving. Quietly, systematically, and in numbers that the Census Bureau does not track in real time. Americans with capital, with remote portable incomes, with foreign ancestry they can reactivate, are moving to the very same destinations. Panama, Costa Rica, Portugal, Mexico, Thailand, Vietnam, the motivations are identical. A desire to escape the extraction machine. Retirees on fixed incomes who cannot survive the property tax increases and healthcare premiums. Remote workers who realize that a $90,000 tech salary goes 3 times further in Medellin than it does in Denver. Young families who did the math on college tuition and concluded that raising children in the United States is a 60-year debt trap disguised as a life. This is the structural symmetry I need you to see. The Indian engineer returning to Bangalore and the American family relocating to Panama are making the same calculation with the same variables. They are both voting with their feet against a system where the cost of a stable middle-class existence has become decoupled from any reasonable wage trajectory. The labor force participation rate among prime-age Americans masks how many high human capital individuals are simply opting out of the domestic economy altogether. Working remotely for U.S. companies but spending their income and paying taxes in jurisdictions that do not penalize ambition with street camping. Uninsurable health risk and school systems that produce traumatized graduates. The government will never put a name on this, because it would require admitting that the United States is now an exporter of productive citizens. But the outbound migration data from U.S. expat communities tells a story of the largest sustained outflow since the 1970s. That is not a coincidence, that is a system signal. Now I am going to pull back the lens and show you the historical parallel that should make your stomach drop. I referenced John Glubb earlier. Glubb was a British military historian who studied the rise and fall of empires and found a consistent pattern. Every great power cycle, from Nineveh to Rome to Spain to Britain, lasts roughly 10 generations, about 250 years. The United States turns 250 years old this year, 250. And the late-stage markers Glubb identified are exactly what we are seeing. The concentration of wealth into a narrow oligarch class. The explosion of bureaucracy and regulation that strangles the productive middle. The erosion of the civic bond that makes citizens willing to sacrifice for a collective future. And the flight of talent toward the peripheries where the cost of existence is not yet crushing. In the late Roman empires, wealthy Romans and skilled artisans moved to provincial cities like Constantinople, Antioch, and eventually even the barbarian successor kingdoms where their skills were valued and their tax burden was lower. Sound familiar? In the final decades of British hegemony, a massive outflow of British engineers. Doctors and business builders migrated to the United States, Canada, Australia, and Argentina, taking their productive capacity with them. The fact that someone from Bangalore can now do the same by simply going back home, or that an American can now look at Latin America or Southeast Asia as a viable escape, tells you exactly where we are in the cycle. I am not here to give you a history lesson. I am here to tell you that the cycle is not paused. It is not giving a grace period while we figure things out. It is compiling. And the warning sign that nobody in Washington is reading out loud is that the people with the most options, the most portable skills, the most international mobility are leaving first. Historically, that is the signal that precedes the capital flight. First the talent goes, then the investment reallocates. Then the currency pressure builds. Then the fiscal crisis hits the people who could not leave. If you are still here watching this and you do not have a second passport, a foreign bank account, a remote income stream, or a pile of hard assets, you are in the group that gets left holding the bag when the structural unwind accelerates. I am not telling you to panic, I am telling you to look at the sequence. The sequence has already started. Let me hit you with something specific from the housing sector, because this is the invisible wall that is triggering so many of these departures. The National Association of Realtors reported that the median home price in the United States is now over 6 times the median household income. In healthy economies, that ratio historically hovers around 3 to 4. At 6 to 7, you are in bubble territory that has become permanent policy because the Federal Reserve has no mechanism to deflate it without triggering a banking crisis. For a young professional couple both working full-time, the down payment on a median home in a decent school district now requires roughly $120,000 in cash. $120,000. That number is so far beyond the typical savings rate of American households that it functions as an absolute exclusion barrier. Immigrants look at that number and compare it to what they can buy in their home country with the same capital. And the calculation becomes obvious. In Bangalore, $60,000 buys you a modern 2-bedroom apartment in a growing tech corridor. In Warsaw, 80,000 euros puts you in a new construction unit near a metro stop. In Mexico City, a similar amount secures a property in a neighborhood with infrastructure that rivals many U.S. suburbs. When the asset that has historically been the primary vehicle of middle-class wealth creation in America is locked behind an impossible barrier, the people who still have the option to build wealth elsewhere will take it. And once they take it, they do not come back. And here is the part that really drives the knife in. This is not an accident. The housing market in the United States is not the result of free market dynamics. It is the result of deliberate policy choices over 4 decades. Zoning restrictions that strangle supply. Tax incentives that favor institutional investors buying single-family homes and converting them into permanent rental pools. A monetary policy framework that prioritizes asset price stability over wage growth or housing affordability. The system is not failing. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Extract a rising share of household income and redirect it toward asset holders. The fact that immigrant and native-born workers are now responding to this engineered trap by moving their labor and consumption elsewhere is the market fighting back in the only way it can. But the architects of the trap do not care because they have already captured the political apparatus that could change it. So the draining continues. Now I want to walk you into the realm of the official statistics and show you the mismatch that should make you angry. Every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out a jobs report. The headline numbers get trumpeted by the financial press. The job market is strong. Unemployment is low. But dig into the JOLTS data, the job openings and labor turnover survey, and you see something else. Voluntary quits have shifted dramatically in certain high-skill categories. Professional and business services, information technology, scientific research. The quit rate in those sectors is not a sign of a roaring labor market, where people are jumping to better offers within the United States. A disturbing portion of those quits are people leaving the domestic labor force entirely, moving abroad and taking their output off the U.S. Economic grids, the Bureau does not track where they go, it cannot. But when you cross-reference outbound green card renunciations, changes in tax filing non-resident declarations, and the growth of expatriate communities in foreign cities, a picture emerges of a structural hemorrhaging that the top-line unemployment rate is actively concealing. The unemployment rate is low because the denominator, the labor force, is being hollowed out of its most productive participants. This is not resilience, this is a slow-motion unplugging of the machine. The mainstream media framing of this is either non-existent or deliberately misleading. You will see a 3-minute segment on a morning show about how millennials are embracing affordable lifestyles abroad. It is presented as an aspirational lifestyle trend, a cute human interest story about digital nomads in Bali. It is not framed as a systemic indictment of the cost of living in the West. You will never see a prime-time special detailing how the United States is losing its competitive edge in human capital retention, because that would require talking about healthcare costs, childcare costs, housing costs, student debt, and tax burdens that make it mathematically irrational to build a life here. The silence is the confession, they know. But the advertising revenue depends on keeping you watching, not keeping you informed. Let me break down the emotional dimension, because this is where the decision actually gets made. The spreadsheets matter, but the final trigger is almost always the realization that time is being stolen. I spoke to a former Uber driver turned logistics analyst. A man who came from Nigeria 15 years ago, built a career, got his papers, did everything right. And he told me he decided to return to Lagos last year not because he lost his job, but because his mother died. He had not seen her in 4 years. The visa process, the expense, the fear of re-entry complications kept him away. And when he got the phone calls, he realized he had traded irreplaceable years for a paycheck that had not even allowed him to accumulate enough to fly home comfortably on a regular basis. That is the trade-off nobody puts in the brochure. The immigrant brochure says, come to America, earn dollars, send money home, build a future. It does not tell you that you will miss every funeral, every wedding, every birth of a niece or nephew, and that your children will grow up in a culture that views them as outsiders even as they speak perfect English. When the economic equation stops adding up, the emotional debt comes due all at once. And that emotional debt is now being collected en masse, because the homeland has become a place where you can actually live a full life, not just a place you mourn from a distance. And I have to tell you, this is not just an immigrant story. This is an American story too. I have watched my own generation, people born here, people who did not have to cross a border, quietly give up on the idea of a rooted existence. They move constantly not for adventure, but to stay ahead of rent increases. They delay marriage, delay children not out of preference, but because the financial prerequisite for a stable family feels like a lottery jackpot they will never hit. They watch videos about expat life in Mexico or Thailand not as a fantasy, but as a strategic plan B. The immigrant is leaving, the native is dreaming of leaving. They are both responding to the same structural crack, and the crack is widening. Let me put a final number in front of you, and then I will tell you what you can actually do about it. The World Economic Forum issued a report in late 2025 on global talent mobility. Buried in the appendix was a projection that by 2030, the net migration of high-skilled workers into advanced Western economies would turn negative for the first sustained period since the Second World War. Negative, the very engine that rebuilt Europe and powered the American tech revolution will be running in reverse. The implications for productivity growth, fiscal sustainability of Social Security and Medicare, and the valuation of real estate in coastal cities are catastrophic if you're holding assets that depend on an endless supply of high-earning new entrants to keep bidding up prices. And yet there is no policy conversation happening. There is no national strategy to reverse this. There is just a parade of politicians arguing about border walls and deportation, while the people you actually want to keep are quietly checking out. So what do? I promised I would not just leave you with the terror. I will give you the only play that makes sense in a system that is structurally broken and cannot be fixed by one election cycle. You have to make yourself mobile. That does not mean you have to leave tomorrow. But it means you need to understand your exposure. Do you have assets denominated entirely in one currency? Do you have all your savings in a 401k that is long US equities while the demographic and talent base is eroding? Do you have the legal right to live and work in another country, even if just through ancestry or a remote worker visa program? These are not conspiracy theory questions. These are portfolio diversification questions for your life. The window to secure a second residency, to open a foreign bank account, to build a skill set that can be monetized remotely without geographic restriction, is closing. Other governments are already tightening their programs because they see the wave coming. The ones who got out early from the British Empire did not wait until the sterling crisis hit. They read the cycle and positioned themselves. You have a small window right now to do the same. I need you to understand that I am not rooting for collapse. I am telling you the collapse is already underway, and the people who will survive it with their families intact are the ones who stop believing the official narrative. The official narrative says the United States and Western Europe are still the pinnacle. The destination, the final destination for anyone who wants a better life. The official narrative is lying. The destination is emptying out. The destination is becoming a trap. And the only people who will escape the worst of the trap are the ones who see it for what it is before the exits get sealed. This is not a drill. The reverse migration wave is not a trend piece. It is the first visible stage of a great reordering that will leave a lot of people holding the wrong assets, in the wrong location at the wrong time. I have given you the data. I have given you the history. I have given you the human stories. The only thing left is your decision. Do not let another year go by while you wait for someone in government to fix what they are incentivized to preserve. The math does not work. It is time to act like you believe it.